Welcome to the West Energy Podcast, powering your career. The energy transition plays a crucial role in Australia and the world's future, and the success of this shift hinges on the people driving it. This podcast will interview a diverse group of energy leaders to provide valuable perspectives on career development, leadership, navigating the energy transition, and discussing strategies to manage mental health and wellness in a high-pressure industry. I'm your host, David Smith, the founding partner and director of West Energy and West Recruitment. With over 20 years of recruitment experience and a team that specialises in recruitment across the whole energy supply chain, we're really excited to bring you this series. Welcome to the West Energy Podcast, powering your career with David Smith. I'm David Smith, and I'm thrilled to have Kane Thornton join me on the podcast today. Kane, welcome.
Hi, Dave. Great to be with you.
So, Kane, I think I said to you when we caught up previously, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. Apart from your role, your background, your knowledge, your experience, I've seen you speak at probably, I don't know, many different events, and I think every time I see you interviewing energy executives within the industry, but I'm really excited today to be able to sit down and ask you the questions about yourself, your career, your experience. So thanks for agreeing to be part of this.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's a great podcast. And I love the fact that it's both about energy, but also allows people to tell a bit of their own story. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. So to kick things off, Kane, can you tell our listeners a bit more about Kane Thornton and who you are in your own words?
Yeah, for sure. So my ancestors arrived in Australia about 160 years ago. They set up camp outside of Ballarat, out in regional Victoria, and that was where I was born and grew up. And so really for my first 18 years, very much in the country. I spent a lot of time outdoors in all sorts of ways, on the farm, hunting, fishing, camping, all that sort of stuff. Very stable childhood, loving parents, a couple of brothers who were, supportive, inspiring, annoying, frustrating, all of those
just
things.
Brothers.
Just brothers. Yeah, then I left, I guess I left that life in a way, and I moved to Melbourne to go to university, studied a degree in IT for reasons that are sometimes a bit unclear to me sitting here now, but worked in IT for 3 or 4 years, and then I guess transitioned into the clean energy sector, and 20 years later, here I am, an amazing wife and 2 incredible teenage daughters who are inspiring and challenging and complex and all of those things. So yeah, that's probably a bit of me and my life.
We'll go into that in a lot more detail as we go along. 3 more ice-breaking questions for you. When you were at school, what did you want to do? Was it IT or was it something different?
Well, I think growing up in country Victoria, I probably didn't know what IT was. I certainly couldn't have imagined the sort of work that I've been doing for the last 20 years. I think it was a real example of often you can't be what you can't see. And so what I saw a lot of was people working very practical jobs, people working on farms. I was really interested in gardening. My mother was a keen gardener. I like gardening. And so I think I had this idea that maybe I'd be sort of either working on a farm or in a garden in some way or another. I have been an enthusiastic gardener ever since, in my very small garden in my home in Melbourne. But that was sort of where I was thinking at the time. But looking back, I end up a long way professionally from those ideas as a child.
It's funny, I did a podcast last week and the person were talking about gardening and that being a hobby of theirs. Do you wish you had been a gardener, or are you pretty happy with where the career ended up?
I'm pretty satisfied with where
I would be
where it ended up.
Yeah,
although
okay.
I will say I still love gardening, and so I spent the weekend out pruning my trees out in the front yard. I've got a veggie garden in the backyard that I kind of love getting my hands dirty. I love a bit of, and I think this is from how I was brought up in the country, I love a bit of kind of manual labour. I don't get to do much of that in my day job, so going out and getting to hack down a bit of some limbs or put my hands in the soil and grow something is pretty rewarding actually. So I'm still drawn to it.
Yeah, nice. Second, if you could have dinner with anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
Oh, this is a really interesting question. So I part of the privilege of my role is I get to have dinner with lots of people kind of from around the world and the country, and some pretty important people. In thinking about this, I mean, sometimes the dining experience can be a bit underwhelming, not to name names, but when I thought about it, and to be honest, I'm also very future focused. So there's all sorts of people in the past that I think have been incredible people that have had impact. But when I thought about this, actually, the people that I want to have dinner with most often are my family, my two daughters in particular. So they're teenagers. They're currently both in VCE, which means they don't have a lot of time to be sitting around having a meal with me. Yeah. But so if I had my choice, I'd do that with them every single night. And part of that is because I feel like we've got so much to learn from young people. Their lives are so different to ours. The role of technology in their life, the role of social media, of popular culture, the way they communicate, the way they think about big issues that are happening in the world. I just find it really intriguing. And if I could have my way, I'd have a long dinner with them every single night of the week and get to learn a bit more about them and their lives and get to connect with them, because it's also a precious time, because it's not far away before they're going to be on their way out into the world. They've already got one foot out the door. They'll be fully out the door pretty soon. And so I feel like this is a really precious time. So.
I think about that all the time. I've got two boys, an 11 and 8-year-old, and I don't want to wish the time away at all. But I agree with what you say. Like those sort of times, I can't believe the kids are 11 and 8 already. I think that'd be a good option. What would you have for dinner? Would you be cooking, and what would you make?
Oh, look, they're eternally challenging to cook for, my two. I assume it's always been thus with teenagers, but I cook and love a lot of different food, Italian, Asian, European food. To be honest, I'll cook whatever it is, whatever would get them to the table for an hour with me. I'll cook it. And I say this to them regularly. You tell me what you want and I'll cook it. If it's spaghetti bolognese or, cheese on toast, if that's what'll get you to the table for as long as possible, I'll make it. I mean, as usual, it's less about the food and more about the company and the experience of sitting down with someone and getting to understand a bit more about their life.
Love that. Now, third, what's one thing most people don't know about Kane Thornton?
Well, I think you made reference earlier to probably a lot of people see me doing podcasts, out presenting, doing media, communicating with people, and people often therefore assume that I'm an extrovert. But I'm actually an introvert who's just living in and trained in extrovert skills. And so I think it surprises people when they hear, actually, come the weekend, I actually just want to go home and shut the door and turn off my phone and go into the garden or get on my bike and go for a ride. So it often surprises people that I'm actually an introvert. A lot of our interactions as human beings and professionals is, by definition, it's in an extroverted world, and a lot of the skills that many people develop are ways to communicate and connect with people in that spirit. But I find all of that stuff exhausting, which I think is the sign of an introvert. Is that yes, I love connecting with people, and hopefully I've developed an ability to do that. But it does take a toll, and therefore I need to recharge my battery in my own time, in my own way.
There you go. So far on this podcast, I've spoken with an accountant, a lawyer, a footballer, a marketer, 2 engineers and an ecologist, as well as a farmer, who are all now leaders within the energy industry. So you mentioned this earlier. You studied IT, so you're the first guest with an IT background. Why IT initially, and how has that background shaped the way you think about the energy sector?
Yeah, so I mentioned before, it was a little unclear as to why I chose IT. I didn't really know much of what it was. So I was making this decision back in 1993 when I was finishing high school and heading off to university. So IT was very much in its formative stage. And I think what I put it down to is it felt like it was something that was coming quickly. It was going to be a big deal, and it could have a pretty profound impact on our society, the whole economy, etc. And so it was an interest in this technology and the fact that it was going to be something quite significant and material that I think made me think, I don't quite know what this is, but I think I might go and study it. And I remember my mother saying just that. It's like, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Go for it. My family were really supportive. And then sort of I went and did it. And by the time I got sort of the end of it and started working in it, It was a really exciting time. So I was working in IT from sort of 1999 to sort of 2003 or 4. And it was an amazing time. Like technology was just, it was kind of rushing into all parts of our lives. And it was really exciting being a part of it.
Yeah.
I think sitting here today, in fact, but either my family or my work colleagues laugh because I'm not very good at IT. Like I'm the last. My kids laugh. I don't even know how to turn on our TV. You know, if my laptop doesn't work, I have to yell out to our IT people to come and help me. So feels like there's not a lot of the practical skills that I've carried forward. Albeit, I think it does. You know, the role of technology, and now there's enormous conversation about AI and the impact it will have on either our organizations and or the energy transition more widely. And I'm really interested and curious about that, and I think that's part of maybe the legacy from my time in IT.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned in our previous conversation that during your time in IT whilst traveling throughout Asia, the impacts of climate change really hit home to you and sparked a major career rethink. Now, can you take us back to that moment around what motivated you to leave IT at the time, and how important was passion and purpose in making that leap? Because that would have been a massive leap at the time.
It was a big leap. So I worked in IT for 4 or 5 years. I had some amazing experiences. I worked for IBM for a couple of years, and then I worked for Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Asia for a couple of years. And they were extraordinary experiences. They were experiences that kind of defined really the rest of my professional life. But I guess what became clear through that period of time, there were a couple of different sort of, if you like, dots that got joined up. One was I spent a lot of time in big Asian industrial cities, Tokyo, Beijing, through Vietnam, etc. And a lot of those cities were very polluted. This was so early 2000s. Places like Beijing and Shanghai and Hong Kong were very polluted cities. And there's something about going in and out of them that didn't kind of feel right. I was like, this doesn't feel right as far as how we as a species should be living and how we should be treating the world. Also, spending time in those cities, I found quite isolating. So I lived in Tokyo for a couple of years, massive city, but actually quite an isolating experience for someone who doesn't speak the language and is new to the city. And so I sort of felt this disconnection, particularly when you think I grew up out in the country, more connected with nature and the natural world. And it was at a time where I was then starting to learn and hear about this thing called climate change, and also see examples of renewable energy. So there were hydro, there was wind and solar starting to be rolled out, and I was sort of interested and intrigued of this is really exciting technology. These businesses seem to be doing great things. And I could see that they were a solution to this sort of, air pollution and environmental problem that I was becoming aware of. So all of those dots kind of joined. And then at that point in time, I was like, it was a pretty high intensity life as a 25-year-old living and traveling across Asia. And I did that for 2 or 3 years. And was like, I think I'm ready for a bit of a different life and to come back home and spend some time at, closer to home. And all of those things brought me to come back to Melbourne and study. I studied a master's essentially in renewable energy policy. And it was really those dots that got connected for me to do that really I've been working in some form ever since.
Wow. It's a big change.
Yeah, it was a big change. I mean, I think it just felt, and purpose is a really important thing in my life. I think it is for all of us. And I also sort of felt like my purpose for being in IT was a bit unclear. It wasn't resonating. And I felt like when I joined all those dots, there was a greater purpose and there was something that was a bit more exciting and a bit more fulfilling. And so it was a big change, and it was a sort of full U-turn. I think some people went, well, that seems a bit mad. You've just done an IT degree. You've had some great professional experiences and now you're cutting and running. Like what?
Probably just as your career's warming up in that space. It's like, no, I'm going to do a U-turn and go in a different direction.
Yeah. Although it didn't take long, like all those professional experiences set me up really well. Working for a massive corporation like IBM or working within government with DFAT or in Asia, I learned a lot of skills of management and working with other people, and a lot of really core skills that, to be honest, I've built on and taken into the energy industry for the following years.
So on that, for anyone considering a similar shift into the energy industry, and that's a large part around this podcast of influencing or motivating or helping people who are outside the industry come into the energy industry, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to make a similar move?
Yeah, I think, firstly, do it. I think that there's nothing.
we need as many people as possible.
We need you over here in the energy transition. But I say that also, which is, I think there is nothing more fulfilling than doing something that you're passionate about, and having the courage to pursue that. I think it's the thing that I'm in awe of people who do that. I think then it's a matter of thinking carefully about what are the skills that you've gotten developed. And it mightn't be obvious to people initially, but there's no doubt that those skills have a place and a role in the energy transition in some form. And so looking at what might that be, and I think part of that's having conversations. People and organisations like yours, Dave, I'm sure can help, but having conversations to better understand where they might best fit in and the easiest path for them to transition in. If you look at what I did, so I then went and did some formal study for a period of time. I then went and volunteered my time for some organisations, for some not-for-profits working in the sector. I'm not sure why they took me on, because I didn't feel like I knew much or could add much, but they said, sure, here's some stuff we'd like you to do. And so that was a way to get me in the door and for me to allow to understand a bit more about the sector and where I might fit. Reach out to as many people as possible. And I remember back then, and I still see it now, of when I would reach out to someone, some people wouldn't get back to you or would say, sorry, I'm too busy. But the generosity of a lot of people to say, great, if you're interested, I'll make the time to have a coffee with you and tell you a bit or help introduce you to some other people. I feel like hopefully I'm repaying that debt to another generation of people today, but to reach out to people and have a go and to put yourself out there. And again, people with good professional skills in any form, there's a place and a role for them in this sector. That they do need to be patient, because sometimes that takes some time.
Absolutely. So you joined, I think it was Hydro Tasmania, as an advisor, which eventually led to your long-standing role at the Clean Energy Council, where you've now spent just over 15 years within the organisation. Can you tell our listeners more about the Clean Energy Council, what you guys do, your role, and how it's evolved over the last 15 years? Because it must have changed so much across your time.
Yeah, the industry's changed incredibly over that 15 years, as has the Clean Energy Council. So we are the peak body for the renewable energy industry, which encompasses, everything from large-scale wind and solar through to rooftop solar and household batteries, green hydrogen, big utility projects like pumped hydro, and really the whole ecosystem. We work with and represent nearly 1,000 companies who are really the leading companies across that ecosystem. One of the great privileges of my role is getting to work with an incredible team of people who have got expertise right across the suite of the different challenges and areas that we need to focus to really support the industry to grow and develop. So, that's obviously everything from doing a lot of work to influence the politics and the policy of the day. We ran and led a really big campaign through the federal election to make sure that the public understood the options and the benefits of clean energy, right through to some really technical and complex areas around specifications on how to connect to the grid or reform to planning and environment regimes that affect projects being built, or at the moment doing a lot of work on the new home battery program and making sure that really works effectively, that there's the right regulations and safety and quality measures in the sector. So really all of those things ultimately to allow the industry to overcome challenges and to unlock the extraordinary opportunity that is clean energy for this nation.
Did you ever think your role would be where it is at the moment when you joined 15 years ago? Because it would have been such a different industry, organisation, climate.
No is the short answer. I couldn't have imagined it, really. It was, when I joined the Clean Energy Council, it was because I thought there was a place for my skills and I could make a contribution. And, I didn't join it thinking that I'd become the CEO, and I didn't join it imagining that at some point in time, as an organisation, we'd have nearly 1,000 members, and in this case, we'd have doubled the amount of renewable energy in the last 5 years. We're charging towards 50% of our energy coming from renewable sources. It 4 million Australian homes with rooftop solar couldn't have imagined that 10 or 15 years ago. And so, it's been an extraordinary journey.
So all stuff I'm very, very keen to cover in a few moments. But one of the big things I want to sort of cover, so you recently announced you're stepping down from your role as CEO after 15 years. What prompted that decision? And I'm sure 1,000 people have asked you or messaged or reached out and asked you this, but what's next?
Look, when you've been somewhere for 15 years, I think the average tenure of a CEO these days is about 4.6 years. So I feel like I've done my time. I was well into time on in all sorts of ways. It is an intense role, and I think over time that starts to take a toll on people. I think I was starting to become a little bit tired. It's also feels like the right time to hand the baton of leadership over to someone else. 15 years is a long time to, in a way, imprint yourself on an organization. I think it's healthy for change. It's a period of some big milestones. The federal election, whatever the outcome would have been, was going to be another inflection point for the industry and for the role of the Clean Energy Council. I'm also turning 50 this year. And so some big personal and professional milestones that all made it feel like this was about the right time to say, I'll head off and I'll pass the baton over to someone else, and they can take the industry and the organisation into that next exciting chapter. I've doubled it over the last 5 years, not personally, but I've played a role. I think it's over to someone else to lead the industry into the next chapter. And so what next for me? Stopping is probably the first thing. It is an intense role. There's probably not a day goes by where there isn't, a decision to be made, or my mobile phone isn't vibrating with some important or complex challenge, opportunity, whatever it might be. And so just being free of that for a period of time to decompress and relax. I talk a lot about, the importance for all of us to look after ourselves first, and we have to do that before we can turn up and have an impact on the energy transition and the incredibly important work that we do. And so I feel like I need a bit of time to do that for myself. And then I'm a really enthusiastic, as you can probably already tell, my family and friends matter a lot to me. So I want to have lots of long dinners and lunches and spend, more quality time with them. And then I love the outdoors. I'm a really enthusiastic cyclist and hiker. And so I've got a long list of places I want to ride my bike or mountains I want to climb. And I really look forward to spending a bit of time doing that. It all feels very self-indulgent. It all feels like an absolute privilege, but I really look forward to that. And then really see what comes after a break. And, I expect I'll stay in the industry. There's lots of really exciting things and work to do, and I hope and expect places for me to continue to contribute.
I'd be very surprised as someone in recruitment if your phone is not ringing off the hook after that. So what did you say, 6-month breaks? What's that?
I have had a few calls already, and I've said call back in January. So look, I look forward to it. It's a fantastic industry. It's one I'm deeply passionate about, and that passion hasn't gone away, and I don't expect it will, even when I'm climbing mountains or riding my bike in the country.
So obviously a few weeks to go until you officially step aside.
Yeah, I finish up on the 1st of August. So I've got a bit to do between now and
a few parties, a few farewell dinners.
Look, the Australian Clean Energy Summit, July 29 and 30th in Sydney, coincides with my 50th birthday, my last week at the Clean Energy Council. So am I allowed to say this? Get your tickets, jump online, book your tickets, see you there. It'll be a giant party. It's an incredible event without any of that. It'll be a sentimental event for me in particular this time around.
I'll be there. I'll be getting my tickets. That sounds like fun. So looking back on your time at the Clean Energy Council, what moments or achievements are you most proud of?
When you're somewhere for 15 years, often it's an accumulation of things. And I say this to my team, that often you don't necessarily notice the little things that are done from day to day, but when you stop at the end of a year or at the end of 5 years and you look back, you think, wow, we've made enormous progress. And so in a way, that's kind of what I'm probably most proud of, is all these little things that the team have achieved and we've achieved as an organization that are all the building blocks for where we stand now as an industry and the strength and achievements of the industry. I mean, there's been some big milestones navigating through the Tony Abbott era review of the renewable energy target. That was a bit of an existential moment for the industry. You know, I played, I think, hopefully a pretty important role in negotiating through that and getting a resolution to that allowed the industry to really kick on in the years that followed. And then, you know, I made reference probably more immediately, we ran a really big and I think a really sophisticated campaign in the lead up to the most recent election. It was another really challenging moment because, you know, let's face it, one policy option was to essentially stop renewable energy and focus on nuclear power. And I think that would have been a disaster for the nation. It would have been a disaster for energy customers, and it would have been a disaster for the clean energy industry. And so we ran a really, I think, sophisticated campaign. It was very targeted. It was very measured. It was very fact and data driven. And, you know, we clearly helped the Australian public understand what was in front of them. And I think we can now go forward as an industry with some certainty and continuity and certainty, at least for the next term of government, you know, if not beyond that, because I think it was, as Peter Dutton himself said, it was a referendum on energy. And I think the Australian people spoke loudly. And so I think our role in that can't be, you don't want to overstate these things, but we clearly played an important role in that. And I'm really proud of the work that the team did to that end.
Absolutely.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Powering Your Career. To stay updated with our latest episodes, don't forget to click follow or subscribe. Leaving a review goes a long way in helping others discover this show. For more details on West Recruitment and how we can assist you, please visit us at westrecruitment.com.au.
The hindsight's a wonderful thing. 15 years in, if you had your time over again with your time within the council, is there anything that you'd approach differently, do a little bit differently?
Oh, look, you can't be in a role for 15 years without having a long list of things that
a long list? I thought it might have just been one or two. But
no, look, I could sit here for hours and talk about the things that I probably should have done differently or wished I had have done, etc. To be honest, I don't spend a lot of time, and I'm not too hard on myself or others through that period. There's all sorts of things that in hindsight you would have done that a bit differently. But again, I say this to my team regularly, which is, look, all we can do is turn up and do our best every day. And sometimes doing your best. Yeah. To be honest, some of our best work has been making a really terrible situation a bit less terrible. Some of our best work has never seen the light of day, has never been spoken about, and never will, but it averted a crisis and a disaster. And so I don't sort of, you know, I'm not too hard on myself. You know, there's moments where you say, oh, actually, should we have handled that a bit differently? You know, I do a lot of media, and I don't listen back to my to my interviews and media work, because I think I did the best I could at that moment in time. Could I have articulated that a bit better? Did I say the wrong number? Oh, yeah, actually I did. Did anyone care? Probably not much. Did it matter? No. Did we turn up and do the best we could? That's what counts, and that's what matters. You know, I think regularly one of my great weaknesses, and I think this is because I care so much about the industry, but one of my weaknesses is saying yes to too much and doing too much. And so in hindsight, I wish I'd have said no to a few more things. Sorry, we can't do that. Sorry, I won't go on that advisory board, etc. I think that's, you know, I think sometimes trying to do too much means that you're not doing a good enough job of the things that really are the highest priority. I could go on and on, but as you can tell, I'm more interested in, I feel like I'm a, however you describe it, lifetime learner. I'm constantly learnt from the things that I didn't get right and said, right, how would I do that again? How would I do that differently next time? And hopefully I'm a better person for it, and the organisation and the team are stronger for it. You know, reflect on it. Don't be too hard on yourself. What could you have done differently, and how would you handle it differently next time?
So you mentioned earlier in one of the stats that you've referenced to myself in the past that you've helped double renewable energy generation in Australia over the past 5 years. That must be such a proud stat, figure, sentence to be able to say out loud.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm in it because I care about it.
Yeah.
And really, I like to think that a part of what I love about the industry is the people and the experiences and who you get to do it with. I really pride myself on how do you go about doing it. And so, I think the journey is really important, and being respectful and having fun and being professional and all those things. But ultimately, we're here to achieve an outcome. And the outcome, when I started in the industry, we're at 15% and we're nearly at 50%. Doubled it in the last 5 years. And again, that wasn't all because of me. It wasn't all because of the Clean Energy Council, but being part of that and I think an important part of it, I can rest easy in the next phase of my life knowing that I've had a pretty big contribution. And I think that's an incredible legacy for Australia and the world.
So obviously there were a whole lot of hard work that went into that. How did you make that happen? And what were the key drivers behind that growth?
I mean, the key drivers, at some level, they're obvious, and that is the technologies are proven, the costs have come down, and Australia's old generation is coming out of the market. And that, that fundamentally, no matter what else happens around that, says this technology and these solutions have got a big part to play in the country. A lot of our work has then been trying to smooth that out and unlock it and make it happen. And that, a lot of that's about the politics and the policies, most importantly, that will facilitate that. So just because some coal's coming out and renewables are the lowest cost doesn't mean that the business case instantly stacks up and the investment will flow. And a lot of our work has been on getting the policies right. And so whether that's the renewable energy target, whether it's the capacity investment scheme, the role of bodies like ARENA and the CEFC, like these are all really important policies that we've played a role in putting in place and making sure they're effective. And then it is just a lot of the little things of, in New South Wales, how are birds and bats handled through the planning regime? What's the connection process for connecting a new battery into the grid? How are we developing the workforce for the future, and do we have the right training? So it's just all of these little things that really go to building a stronger foundation for an industry where people can come in, they can invest, they can grow, they can ultimately go out and sell more rooftop solar or build more wind or solar farms or batteries or energy storage. So it's all the little things really that stack up to unlocking the enormous potential of the industry.
So looking forward, and I suppose whilst you're reading your books or cycling, how can we sustain or even accelerate that momentum as a country and as an industry, do you think?
Well, I think the outcome at the last federal election, I think, was critically important. As why we ran as big a campaign as we did, because it mattered a lot. And it mattered because we've got continuity of policy. So I spoke about the capacity investment scheme, ARENA, CFC, all of these things get to continue. But I think also the fact that it was a referendum and it sent a really strong signal, I think means that the politics of the energy transition have fundamentally changed, and that's for the better. I think we're now going to have a sustained period of not debating, are we going to transition or not, and will it be to nuclear or not? We'll have a sustained period now of rolling up our sleeves and doing the hard stuff. Like this isn't easy. No. It's an extraordinary economic transformation. It's extraordinary change to the energy system and the way and the flow of electrons from businesses and households to generation, and it's hard. And so now we're going to enter into a chapter of really getting into and solving those really complex problems, and that's not going to be easy.
Now, I don't know if I'll let you know this, but I should have let you know to bring a crystal ball in terms of predicting a little bit around the future. If we were to look 10 years into the future, what do you think Australia's energy landscape will look like? And what role should renewables be playing in that?
I mean, I think it's pretty easy now to envisage that, in 10 years' time, the energy transition, it won't be done, but there'll be, we've doubled the amount of renewables in the last 5 years. We'll double it again in, easily the next 10. And so the reality is that our energy system will be dominated by renewable energy. Wind and solar and hydro will do all the heavy lifting as far as production of electricity. Now, whether that's large scale out on people's homes, or it's rooftop solar and household batteries, or out in business, that will be the dominant source of generation It will, of course, need to be supported by an enormous amount of energy storage, batteries, big and small, mid-duration, long-duration energy storage, suite of new and emerging technologies, really important role for hydro within that. There'll probably still be just a small amount of gas playing a supporting role. I think we'll have seen by that time an enormous rollout and transition in the transport sector, so electric vehicles, and we'll see enormous electrification, I think, through major parts of industry. And with all of that, I think we'll have much greater sophistication as to the role of the consumer, the way in which their own energy is being produced or consumed, how that's being optimized, how they're being incentivized for it, how they're using it and controlling it all with their mobile phone or not, and just letting it do its thing without even really thinking about it. So I think that's the future that we're heading towards. And I think we've already got, in a way, we've got postcards already of that future. If you look at South Australia, for example, and its deployment of renewables, if you look at Tasmania, places like King Island, I think, are an extraordinary insight into what that system might look like and some of the complexities that we need to work through. I think there's plenty of examples across the country already.
Yeah. Seems like every time I'm sort of opening the internet at the moment, everyone's talking about sort of technology and AI. From your perspective, what influence do you think AI is going to have on the industry over the next few years also?
Yeah, it's hard to read at the moment. I mean, I've got a feeling it'll be quite profound. I think certainly if you look at some of the more complex parts of particularly things like the energy market and how electricity is traded, I think technology is going to have a pretty significant impact. I think the way in which, for example, the distribution system operates to optimize how rooftop solar or household batteries integrate when they export, how they anticipate emerging weather patterns and cloud events, predicting energy demand and looking at how do we cycle control different load. I think that's the space that I think technology is going to play an enormous role on, and the greater sophistication that technology and things like AI can bring, I think are really exciting. Beyond that, I mean, there's a lot of areas that, I know there is a lot of work going on, whether it's about siting of wind turbines or solar farms to maximize their output in the local geography, the way in which construction techniques are kind of evolving to make them more efficient. I think there's a lot of applications, some of which we probably haven't really even started to imagine.
Yeah, it's moving at such a fast pace. In terms of skill sets that you can see that are going to be in need over the next few years, well, what do you identify those to be?
I mean, there's an enormous amount of kind of practical skills that we need in the industry. We know, for example, qualified electricians. Yeah. We're about to see an enormous spike in the deployment of household batteries because of the policies put in place by the federal government and quite a number of state governments. Right now, today, we don't have enough qualified battery installers, who are fundamentally electricians. So we need a lot more electricians, but when you walk out into large-scale projects, civil contractors, people in sales and marketing of consumer technologies, product developers to develop the really important products and user interfaces, wind turbine technicians. We're going to have a much bigger fleet of kit already out there that needs to be maintained and upgraded and managed. There's an enormous set of skills that our industry is going to need over the coming years to make all of this happen. I think probably beyond that, and in a way more importantly, leadership and agility. To the discussion about AI, we're not sure quite what that will look like, but we're going to need people who are agile, who've got really a lot of comfort in uncertainty and change. So even though, we're going to have some policy and political certainty for a period, this is complex stuff. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of moving pieces, and people can manage that uncertainty and that change. I think is going to be really, really important.
Yeah. So talking about the energy industry a little bit further, what do you personally love about working in the energy industry, and why should others consider building a career in it?
Well, I think fundamentally energy is such a significant part of our daily lives. I mean, at the end of the day, electricity powers the country, and whether that's big resources companies that are extracting critical minerals and processing them to send to international markets, whether it's you or I, when we arrive home and are hot or cold or hungry or tired or something, we need electricity to power our lives. It's a critical part of the economy. It's an essential service for all of us. It obviously has a pretty significant impact on the climate. Historically, that creates all sorts of problems. It's a big solution to the climate challenge, but it's also a big solution to, parts of the country. I grew up in country Victoria where, the agriculture sector had tough times. There's not a lot of job opportunities. And in many regions now, renewable energy is one of the biggest employers. It's creating jobs in parts of the country where they'd otherwise be challenged and creating industries of the future. So, there's a whole range of reasons why this really matters a lot. And that's one of the reasons I'm in this sector, because it matters a lot. And I want to be a part of that. I mean, beyond that, it's an exciting sector. It's a growth sector. I love the people I get to work with and spend time with. I think because there's a common kind of purpose and a common motivation. It's a complex game, and so it's not boring. It's regularly challenging, and I think I like to be challenged in all sorts of ways. And this sector is not short of challenges. It's a great industry. Yeah. It's an extraordinary opportunity, and for someone considering coming into it, you can be part of something really big, and someday drive down the road or fly over the western suburbs of Sydney and say, I helped install those panels or batteries or that wind farm out in the countryside somewhere. And that's a pretty big motivator, I think, for people to turn up and do what they do in this sector.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's certainly not slowing down.
No, that's right. I mean, that's the other thing. There's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
And again, particularly with that federal election out of the way, with there's no turning back. Yeah. This is going to be a massive part of the Australian economy and a huge industry.
Absolutely. We caught up for a coffee before recording this podcast. We're talking about sort of diversity, equity, inclusion within the industry. And I think there's a lot of talk in the general world at the moment around sort of moving away from sort of diversity targets. But there's obviously huge benefits around diversity, equity, and inclusion in organisations, in industries, in teams. Why is DE&I important to you, to your industry, and I suppose to the team that you manage within the Clean Energy Council?
Well, I think you don't need to reflect for very long to understand the power of diversity. In fact, part of what we're doing is creating a more diverse electricity sector with a lot of different technologies and solutions coming together. So, I think anyone who runs a team or runs an organization understands the power of diversity in your own team and your own organization. And just because Donald Trump doesn't like DEI and what it stands for doesn't change that at all. And so, I think we have to acknowledge and recognize that the electricity industry has historically been very male dominated. There's been a distinct lack of diversity, and I think the Clean Energy Council, we've worked really hard with a whole range of initiatives to try and shift the dial on that, whether that's about scholarships or mentoring programs or promoting women in different forums and providing a way for women to come together and recognise challenges and work together and inspire each other, I think is just critically important. We've made progress, I think, as an industry, but we've got work to do. There's still, if you look at a CEO level, I think at mid-levels of organisations, you can see the impact of some of those initiatives and change coming through. But at a CEO level and board level, there's still a distinct lack of diversity. Now, that is changing. Yeah. It needs to change faster, and I think it matters a lot to the energy sector and clearly to the people coming into the sector.
Yeah. Is there anything we can be doing better, do you think?
I think having conversations like this and recognising that there is work to do, I think that is happening. It needs to continue to happen. So just because parts of society or other countries in the world don't think this is important shouldn't matter. I think now's probably the time where we need people to have some courage and stand up and speak. But then really it's a matter for each individual in their organisation or team to continue to reflect. There was a time where on a construction site for wind or solar, there was only one set of toilets and they were for men. Now I think we've moved past that now, but I think every team and organisation needs to continue to reflect on how do they keep shifting and changing, and how can they make sure that their workplaces are more inclusive and more supportive of everyone in different ways.
I said at the start of the podcast that obviously I've seen you speak at many different industry events, and one of the things that I've loved when you've run a lot of panels is one of the questions you ask initially is to ask a lot of the panelists about their views on mental health and wellness, different tips or tricks that they have around that. Why is mental health such a priority for you both personally and for your team? Because obviously it seems very passionate and a high priority for yourself, Kane.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that at the end of the day, we're people first. And so we have to be looking after ourselves before we can turn up to our workplaces and do the extraordinary, complex, intense work that we do. And that includes caring for and supporting other people and our own teams. And so I've been, through phases where if I haven't been looking after myself, it's been really challenging to turn up and try and do my job and the complexity of that, let alone to try and support members of my team who they themselves might be struggling. So it took me a while to learn this, but it meant that I had to do what I need to do first and care for myself. And so I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, but I do a lot of things for me personally outside of work, and some of it, to be honest, not just outside, in the workplaise.
And sorry to ask, and please don't answer this if you don't, is that obviously off some dark times in your life, like your...
Yeah. I mean, look, I've had challenges. I mean, I haven't suffered from kind of severe mental health problems, other than there's been periods where it's all become too much, and that's a combination of what's been happening in the workplace and workplace intensity, and then the complexity and messiness of my own life have just been, this is really, really hard, and I need to. The world's saying I've got to do something different right now, and it's not. There's people, and I'm sure we all know them, that have had more acute experiences with mental health. It's not versions of that, but at various stages, I've found it really hard to turn up, and therefore haven't been at my best in the workplace, haven't been at my best in my personal life with family or friends or whatever else. And so I think one of the major lessons from that is that actually, therefore, investing in my own well-being and mental health is really important, and taking the time, whether that's from work or my personal life, to care for myself first, to do some exercise or spend some time doing whatever I need to do to make sure that I'm in a good place so that I can turn up to work and be my best, and so that I can do the really hard stuff, and I can, as much as is possible, care for and support people around me as well, whether that's personally or professionally.
So what are the things that you implemented in your life that have been a help to yourself?
I mean, I think talking is one of them. So, I think...
Which doesn't always come naturally.
It doesn't come... Again, I grew up in, country Victoria. It's not something that people do. They don't talk about their well-being. And so, I think having the courage to talk is really, really important. I do a lot of things sort of more practically to make sure that I'm in balance as much as I can. It's all the usual stuff about sleeping and eating and avoiding or minimizing alcohol. I exercise every day, and that's, I think there's clearly a link between mental health and physical health, but also that exercise, it's essentially a form of meditation, because I get to escape my work. I put my phone away. I get to do something. I get to connect with myself physically. It's about spending time with friends and family. Connection is really, really important. I talk a lot about bike riding, but actually it's just a cover for getting to hang out with other people on a long ride or at a coffee shop or something. I see a therapist when I need to. I think, things like that I think are really important to help us. I always find it really interesting if someone has a toothache or they've pulled a hammy or strained a knee, they go and see a professional, a dentist or a doctor. We're quite open about that. We quite like it. But if we're really struggling with our mental health, why wouldn't you A, talk about it, and B, go and get some professional help in some form? So but
there is such a stigma, and I think it makes a world of difference when a CEO of an industry or a CFO of an organisation like yourself so openly talks about that, and also talks about they do get help, because it is so true that it's a doctor to help in terms of your mental health. So
yeah, I think that's right. Again, just kind of normalizing, just trying to normalize these things. We work hard to try and do that in our workplace. We have an EAP program that we promote and talk about regularly. We have, mental health champions in the organization. So I think these are all the things that, again, they, on one level, once you put the stigma aside and become more comfortable with it, they just kind of feel pretty natural and the right things to be doing and talking about to care for ourselves and to support others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kane, I've thoroughly enjoyed our time on the podcast. Thank you once again. Thanks for everything you've done in terms of the renewable and clean energy industry over the last 15 years. Enjoy your break.
I'm not done yet, but yes.
But thank you very much. Thanks for being part of this, and thanks for sharing your story, your knowledge. And yeah, as my marketing team always says, if you like the podcast, please like, share, subscribe. But Kane, thanks again for being part of it.
No, thanks, Dave, and congratulations. It's a great initiative and a great podcast. And I think having these conversations, hopefully there's something in that for everyone out there to join the industry or take care of themselves or to inspire them to be part of the energy transition. You wouldn't want to be anywhere else, would you?
Certainly not. Thanks, Kane.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Powering Your Career with David Smith. Join me next time as we talk to energy leaders to provide you valuable perspectives on career development, leadership, navigating the energy transition, and strategies for managing mental health and wellness in a high-pressure industry. If you are enjoying this series, please click follow or subscribe for further episodes. And leaving a review or a comment helps others find this podcast. Also, if our team can assist you with any recruitment requirements or you are keen to discuss your career journey, please reach out to West Energy or West Recruitment at westrecruitment.com.au. Thanks.